Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 7th Annual Faces of PAD Conference. We're very grateful for your presence here today. It's been incredible to see how Faces Conference has evolved over the last 7 years from a small educational event to something really beyond what we imagined. I know that there are more people coming in, and I know there was an accident out there that people are trying to work through. But as one of my main jobs is to keep this conference on time so that when we wrap the day that we finish this conference at the right time so we can move on with our weekend and our lives. Together we're going to explore a range of different treatment options and methodologies with the shared goal of enhancing patient care and achieving better outcomes. That's really our main goal. And your encouragement and dedication to the dialogue is vital to our mission, so we look forward to good questions and discussion, and we thank you for being part of this journey with us. Again, I want to thank the speakers for sharing their time and their talent and their passion. It's inspiring, and I always learn from everybody, and I think it's awesome. I want to also thank the local visual team, Encore Events, and Six Strong Media for their excellent work in providing the audiovisual for us. Also for Immertech, which will be responsible for the live cases that we have today that we'll be showing and engaging in. Also, our sponsors in the rotunda, please make a round and check out the different sponsors. They're the ones that really have allowed us to have this event today for everybody. So at this point, I'm going to ask Jessica Smith to come up, and we're going to start off our conference. And the first section is really learning about health and what health should be. And then we work on focusing more on pathology a little bit later and disease process, and then how we address those. So Jessica, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm a women's health nurse practitioner, but I'm also a certified menopause provider. So I am from Lotus, which is a private office in Chattanooga, and I was super excited to be invited here just to kind of explain a little bit more of how estrogen, menopause could be a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So I'm going to kind of jump through some of these slides about me. Main thing I want you for this slide is that bottom graph. You see kind of like the crazy waves. That is what happens during menopause transition. When our estrogen and our hormones are going chaotic, they're not stable, that is the part that we're going to focus on today, where all the risk factors kind of influence y'all's patients. This is just a funny morning joke, Menopause, everyone thinks itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, psycho. Not fun, but that's how we feel. This, I'm going to jump through. This is more just like my patient base, what I see every day, talking about those symptoms, how they're feeling. Hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, heart palpitations, very, very common, brain fog. You just don't feel your best. So for y'all, in a summary, stiffening of blood cells, we're going to think of hypertension, not blood cells, sorry, blood vessels. Increase in cholesterol, again, that's an increased risk factor, y'all know. Change in memory cognition. We're wondering if vasomotor symptoms, the brain fog, could be an early marker for dementia. Osteoporosis, again going back to estrogen, joint pain, arthritis, and decreased muscle mass and strength. So kind of getting deeper into, again, y'all's patient population, we know that cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for women, but are you aware how menopause could affect that risk? So the menopause transition, again, is that wave that I was getting you to look at, is all the accelerated risk. So when we start to lose estrogen, our risk quadruples. It is insane how fast it goes. So if we could treat that, it's a really great prevention. So everyone should know the essential lives of the 7, but they've added a new one with 8, which is where sleep health is one of the criteria. Not just, blood pressure, lipids, BMI, but sleep is also really important, which is interesting because I will say most of my women, their first symptom they come to me is like new insomnia, new sleep patterns. That affects so many things. This just basically explains how like only 7% of women going through menopause report physical activity that actually meets the criteria that's recommended to keep us heart healthy, and less than 20% keep a healthy diet. That goes back to like if you're having poor sleep, if you're not feeling your best, it's hard to maintain that good lifestyle. BMI, fat distribution, body composition changes, that goes more to where the estrogen, testosterone is changing. So we see women have more fat around their abdomen, their hips, their thighs. That increases risk of fat around like our hearts, our lungs, our liver, all the things that we kind of know about. But that does significantly happen during the menopause change. Lipids is another one where there is a steep acceleration in both the total and the LDL of cholesterol, as well as the HDL, which normally that's good, but it's not as functional because it links to estrogen. When your estrogen declines, the quality of your HDL also goes down with it. This goes to blood pressure and just vascular function. Kind of the same thing. If there's not estrogen, there's not that collagen, that elasticity in our blood vessels, they are going to stiffen, increase that blood pressure, and then also fill with more plaque. With regards to the weight gain and how our fat and muscle mass changes, that increases their risk for metabolic syndrome and diabetes, which we know is a leading factor as well. Early age and menopause, this is just something to kind of think about. Not every woman, we normally say like perimenopause is people 40 and up, but there are certain populations where it could be surgical menopause or premature menopause where it's more people like less than 40 or even less than 45. So that is just something to be mindful of. It's not the characteristic 50 to 52 average. It could be all kinds of ranges. The reason why I put this slide in here is I just want you to think that premature menopause leads to premature loss of estrogen. That is the loss of that protection. So they're having all these cardiovascular risks earlier. Vasomotor symptoms we know are hot flashes, but again, the reason I put this slide in here is not to explain hot flashes, but more to think how estrogen is a natural anti-inflammatory. And so if we're losing that protection, again, it just adds to the risk for your patient population for the cardiovascular system. That repeats the same thing. A lot of misconception with hormone use is that you could start hormones, but you have to come off at age 65. That's no longer true. If you wanted to start hormones early, which we do recommend, which is again perimenopause around 40 and up, but you have to start before age 60. After 60, for a woman, the risk-benefits ratio is significantly worse, where it's just not recommended. So if we could get these women in before 60, we could be very preventative for their heart health. Biggest thing is just guidelines, just going over our survey. I'm not going to go through each of these, but basically I have a booth out there that just goes over like different screening tools that we use for each patient, just to look at like their overall picture for just normal risk factors we all know, but also specifically for women. And a couple key things to take home. So obviously a healthy lifestyle is important. We want that, we want to promote that in the clinical setting, but it goes back to if your women patients are not feeling their best, they're not getting good sleep, they're feeling, loss of control of their body, they are having less confidence because of the way they look, they're having extreme brain fog, just hot, cold all the time, that's hard to do. More than 70% of cases could be prevented with lifestyle changes alone, so of course that's very great to encourage that, but they might need a little bit more help. So that's where the campaigns to kind of target women to explain how we can help them. These are the studies I used for my presentation. This you don't really need to know about. The breast cancer awareness, that we go through in very much detail with our patients whenever we start any kind of hormone therapy, but it gets a bad rap. In a nutshell, doing a transdermal estrogen is significantly safer than an oral estrogen, so that is what we offer at Lotus. We know that's not going to put them at unnecessary risk for not only breast cancer, but also blood clot, stroke, heart attack. And then resources. Biggest resource, of course, is Lotus, but there is also the menopause symptoms, and then there's two really cool podcasts called Feisty Menopause and You Are Not Broken. They're excellent. And then my reference I used today. Thank you, guys.
Greetings, everybody. Good morning. I am Ed Jones with Nutrition World here in Chattanooga, and I'm again, I think this is my 6th year to speak. I'm extremely honored, as I always have been, for the faith and the encouragement that Dr. Lassar and his wife Tracy have encouraged us to help empowering people in this community with the education of nutrition. Nutrition World, if you've never seen it, we're on Lee Highway 6201. Been in business 45 years, and I started in 1979, and will continue to do this until I can no longer do this, because I love it. I don't have to go to work. I get to go to work in the mornings. Just to show the change of how the perception of people wanting to be empowered has shifted this year alone, and I'd say at least half of these videos I have done to educate, not to sell. We have 6 million views on YouTube, 2.4 million Instagram, 4.1 on Facebook, and 13 million on my personal TikTok. That means people are hungry for this information. One of the things I've said throughout a lot of my teachings over my years is that doing nothing as we age can be one of the riskiest moves in your life. And it's easy to get paralyzed by fear of the media, fear of traditional thinking that you shouldn't add nutraceuticals, you shouldn't work out hard, you shouldn't add more protein. Those things can be very dangerous, so I hope to encourage people to not be paralyzed. I kind of look at health as a chair with 4 legs on it. One is diet. What is the idea of my diet? It's eating about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, no less than 1/2 gram a pound per pound of body weight. I see women really never reaching these levels. It will reduce body fat, build muscle, maintain cognitive abilities. When you have less than that and you're eating a diet full of carbohydrates, it's going to be negative as we age. Healthy fat. I'm a huge believer in the avocados and the olive oils. I take a bottle of olive oil with me to most restaurants because they are giving junk canola, diluted olive oils, and seed oils, which are the shortenings, the canola oils, the sunflower oils, are so toxic to our cardiovascular system. Actually takes 6 years for these seed oils to finally rid themselves of your body. So doing processed foods, doing fried foods, doing these is devastating. Second, sleep, having enough REM and deep. Been one of my challenges. I have a sleepy book on nutritionw.com, about 15 pages that explains how do I get through this? How do I help other people? It's a system. It's creating more rhythm of sleep. Exercise, weight training has to be number 1, and then VO2 max training is number 2. Dr. Peter Attia, one of my heroes, last year I gave away the free Audible by Dr. Attia, the book Outlive, to people in this audience. I was astounded how many actually emailed me to get that. That's the way that we're going to change the face of thinking and healthcare in this city. And lastly, what I call the green pharmacy, nutraceutical. If past 40 or even before, I don't see how we can be optimally healthy unless we are accessing the nutraceutical parts. Now, a lot of traditional thinking does not embrace that. One is, it's not their fault, they're not trained in it. A lot has changed over the decades too, and we've learned a lot. And, you know, Nutrition World has 17 practitioners. Dr. Brian Johnson, Dr. Kurt Deering, Dr. Litwin, pediatrician, 17. We want to create an empowerment so that your patients and this public can create something that I call the team approach. You cannot age gracefully without having a team. Just like the one who just spoke on hormones. I mean, these are the things, people like that have to be added to the picture of our aging. Now, supplements and their safety. You know, we get told things early in life or decades ago, and they kind of become like tattooed into our brain. And one of those is that we're an unregulated industry. It's really not true. Let me tell you what's happened the past year just at Nutrition World. The FDA has been in Nutrition World countless times. Do you know why? They buy products from us. They bought products every other month for a long time. They take them back to the lab. They check for contaminants and potencies. And I always ask them, can I see the results? And they said, only if you fail. We've never failed. We've never failed. Secondly, we've had recalls after recalls because of things like gluten accidentally getting into products. Not really anything dangerous. It's not peanuts, it's gluten. they are watching very carefully what we do. And we're a great self-regulated industry. So the lack of, the motto of it's not regulated simply is not true. It's like the old myth that a chigger is itching because it digs into your skin and you put fingernail polish on. We'll never live long enough to get past that kind of image. Well, we are going to live long enough to get past the image that nutraceuticals are safe. And one thing that I'm bragging about, we have Dr. Kurt Deering that works at Nutrition World. He'll be at our table today. And he's got decades of clinical pharmacy experience dealing with patients. And what he said, the benefits of nutraceuticals far outweigh the risk. My experience with nutraceuticals are very safe with virtually everyone, with the exception of those geared toward weight loss and esoteric ones not commonly used. While the potential for interactions between medications and dietary supplements is high, the actual clinical risk appears to be low. I treat everyone like my mom, and I give 12 nutraceuticals and only 2 pharmaceuticals. So Dr. Deering will be at our table today if anyone wants to talk to him till about 11 or 12. We are putting together a team so that you can trust us with your patients. We're not going to go against anything that's a traditional thinking or recommendations, but we want to fine-tune and tweak what we can do to empower people to get what we call the centenarian decathlon, putting a plan together to age strong, to age vibrant, to age to be able to function and have hobbies and carry grandkids and groceries up steps. This will not happen without a PLAN, a plan of action. And giving polypharmacy will not be the answer to that solution. We might have to do it to save some lives and to keep people breathing. But you know, a lot of people, they quit breathing at 75, but they actually kind of died at 45 when the anxiety, the depression, the aches and pains, the lack of energy, the insomnia, those are devastating. They are handled mainly by lifestyle. Insurance does handcuff a lot of the healthcare practitioners because they want to do better, but they only have 12 minutes. You can't under that system. So I want everyone here to know that we want to be your partner on the journey to optimal health, not just living. So know that you can trust us. Come to our store. I'd love you to visit. Ask for me when you come in. But again, we have professionals like Dr. Deering and all these other people, 17. Look us up on nutritionw.com and learn more about us and ask any questions later on today if you are here. And thank you all for being attendant and interested, because last year I was amazed how many of the physicians and nurse practitioners accessed that free Outlive book that I sent. I really didn't think many would, because he is on the verge of a change of healthcare. Thank you very much.
Presentations to top. So my name is Alison Bailey. I'm a cardiologist, and Dr. Lassar and his team asked me to talk about diet and nutrition for the healthy aging body. So I thought I'd start with asking, what is wellness? So I think that's important to think about, because wellness is really what all of us want to achieve. And we want to use all the things that we just talked about to maintain a state of wellness. And so here's 2 different definitions, but wellness is an active process, so you have to choose to be well. If you don't choose to be well, you are going to be sick. And you have to think about that every day. But it's an active process where people become aware of and make choices toward a more successful existence. And it encompasses lots of things. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or immunity. I see lots of people who are not well, who don't have any health issues diagnosed. But we're all here because we want to make people well. And so nutrition is a huge part of wellness. I want to show you guys this graphic because this is a new statement that came out from the American Heart Association this year. And it talks about cardiovascular, kidney, metabolic health, CKM, right? And when you think about the patients that we see, my patients all have a vascular surgeon, a nephrologist, an internist, frequently an endocrinologist, because the same disease that causes heart disease, the same set of risk factors causes kidney disease and diabetes. And so it's really important, I think, this statement, because it starts putting this concept of cardiometabolic health into stages. So stage 0 is where all of us want to be. No risk factors. And really life's essential 8 that we just heard about earlier is really where we want to start at. And that's focusing on prevention. And diet is a huge part of prevention. Stage 1 is when you're obese. Stage 2 is when you have metabolic risk factors and chronic kidney disease. Stage 3 is subclinical cardiovascular disease, which is people that we see sometimes for prevention, those with an elevated calcium score or left atrial enlargement on an echo. And then stage 4 is when you have cardiovascular disease, heart failure, coronary disease, peripheral disease, or a stroke. And so this is an important concept to think about, and if you haven't seen this document, I'd recommend you look at it. Then next, I really like this. Top 5 modifiable risk factors contributing to cardiovascular disease burden in the United States and world. So this is global. High blood pressure, dietary risk, high LDL, air pollution, which is increasing everywhere, but increasingly in the third world, and then high body mass index. And so when you think about these, and mental health is important to everything. We should say that. If people have poor mental health, they're not going to do well. But our nutrition plays 3 of the 5 top risk factors for cardiometabolic health. So let's talk about nutrition. Who has noticed a change in obesity rates in the United States? Okay, so this is 2011, and if you look here, in 2011, the light orange, is the worst rates of obesity, 30 to 35%, okay? So you can see there's a few states at 30 to 35%. If we go through the years, 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, we're getting up into 45% of the population with obesity in Mississippi at this point, 2020, 2021, and then 2022, and then our most recent 2023. So in 2023, there are states where 45 to 50% of the population are obese. It's not just overweight, it's obese, a body mass index of over 30. In Tennessee, it's bad. 37% of our population falls into the obese category. In the US, 70% of the population is overweight or obese. And this is probably the strongest risk factor for developing cardiometabolic disease. So we got to work on this. If we look at cardiovascular health and your risk of developing heart failure in your lifetime, it goes up. So these are people who have high cardiovascular health. Means they're active, they eat a good diet, they don't smoke, their blood pressure is controlled. And you can see whether you're white or black, a man or a woman, your lifetime risk of heart failure is incredibly low. But look at what happens when you have moderate cardiovascular health. So you only have 2 or 3 of those risk factors controlled. Your risk goes up. And look if you have low cardiovascular health. Your lifetime risk of heart failure increases if you're a black woman to almost 40%, okay, compared to very negligible. So cardiovascular health overall improves everything that we do. So I like to talk about healthy eating patterns, okay? There's not one diet that's perfect for everybody, but healthy eating patterns are what we should all think about. And almost every one of our guidelines, no matter what the disease state now, say exactly the same thing. That a healthy, balanced diet consists of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean protein, nuts, seeds, and cooking in non-tropical oils such as olive oil, which you just heard recently here. So if we think about healthy eating patterns, they reduce cardiovascular disease mortality. We live longer. They reduce frailty, right? I tell my patients, I'm like, I want to live to be whatever age I can be and still do all the things I can do and then drop dead. I don't want to go through this frailty period where I'm spending my days not able to do things. So healthy eating reduces frailty. It reduces sarcopenia, and sarcopenia we're learning more and more about because of weight loss drugs, but sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass. And so nutrition is really important for that. It reduces polypharmacy. Has anybody talked to a patient that's in the gap or the donut hole for Medicare? Talk about reducing quality of life when you have to make a decision between your medicine or food. So polypharmacy is a big thing as we get older. A healthy eating pattern improves cognition, reduces dementia, and improves mental health. So our well-being, how do we feel? So we all need to work on eating healthy. What do we say? 6 in 10 adults in the U.S. are living with one or more age-related chronic diseases. 60% of people, and 30% of people have 4 or more chronic diseases. If we think about what do people eat, we know, we just said we should limit foods and beverages that are high in added sugar, saturated fat, sodium, and alcohol. And look at what we see. 75% of people have dietary patterns that are low in fruits, vegetables, and dairy. 63% exceed the amount of added sugars we should be having. 77% exceed the amount of saturated fat, and 90% exceed sodium levels. So we do very poorly in the United States when we look at this. If we look at the top source for added sugar, it's sugar-sweetened beverages. It's not cakes and pies for most people. It is coffee-based beverages. That's the number one source of sugar-sweetened beverages. So cappuccinos and lattes and all the things with sugar in them. If we look at the average source, the number one source of saturated fat, it's sandwiches, and it's from dairy and cheese. Okay, so saturated fat we know strongly associates with LDL cholesterol. We want to minimize that. And then if we look at the number one source of sodium, it's again sandwiches, because processed bread and processed meats are very high in sodium. So we should try to limit those. And then if we look at ages 19 through 30 and we say added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium, what we can see is the orange is too much. So everybody gets too much in this age group of added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium. But what happens as we age? 31 to 59, it's no better. And then 60 and older, it's even worse. Okay, so everybody in this room probably fits into this 94%, so we need to work on that. And sodium has nothing to do with the salt shaker. It's all from processed food. I think most of us know that now. So I always love to talk about the blue zones. So blue zones are places that people live longer and better, and they're 10 times more likely to reach 100. And so what are the secrets of the blue zones? You can't talk about diet without talking about the rest. So people move naturally. They're active. You don't necessarily have to go to the gym, but you have to get some physical activity into your life. And then you should do things you enjoy. What else do? They have a purpose, right? They get up every morning, like Ed said, because he loves what he does. He doesn't have to go to work. He gets to go to work. And so people in the blue zones feel that. They feel vested in what they do, whether that's spending time with their family or having a job or getting together with friends. And they also de-stress. They also have a feeling of connection. They either go to religious services, they have a faith, they have groups of people they hang out with and they communicate with. And so we should all be working on trying to find that. And then they eat wisely. And this is what we'll spend a few minutes talking about at the end. There's an 80% rule, which means if your belly's 80% full, stop eating. I think that's good. I've told my son that since he was little. Plant slant doesn't mean these people are necessarily vegetarian or vegan, but their diets are 90% plant-based because that's the cheapest diet and the most readily abundant in many places in the world. And then if they have wine, 4 of the 5 blue zones have small amounts of wine, 1 has none, but it's wine at 5. It's not sitting in a dark room drinking. It's with your family over food. So I love this quote from Hippocrates, right? Let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. So every time you eat, you're either preventing disease or causing disease. So you can think about that every time you pick your fork up. And again, a healthy eating pattern is what we want to focus on. And most of the healthy diets that we talk about are DASH style. What does that mean? That's dietary approaches to stopping hypertension. Low in sodium, less than 2,300 milligrams a day, less than 1,500 is better. Lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low fat or fat-free dairy if you eat dairy, and then low in saturated and trans fats. So that's the dietary profile we should be trying to get. So again, vegetables have lots of benefits, color, antioxidants, potassium, fiber. Fruits have much the same. Legumes are a good source of plant-based protein, which I agree with Ed, we don't get enough of in this country. And then whole grains give us lots of fiber, which reduce disease on many levels. And then nuts are a really great way to get our omega-3 fatty acids from a dietary source. People who eat beans live longer. So I love to put this slide in here, but in the blue zones, meat's only eaten on average 5 times a month, and it's a small amount of meat. But beans are the cornerstone of most of the diets in the blue zones. And the average American eats about 220 pounds of meat, but blue zone residents only eat about 20 pounds of meat a year. So if you look at the blue zones, what does their diet look like? It's 95% plant-based, like I said, 65% carbs, but it's whole carbs. It's not processed carbs. There is no Little Debbie snack cakes in the blue zones. It's 20% fats and about 15% protein. And then if we look at the food guidelines, what does it look like? It's sort of 95% plant-based. It says go whole, meaning eat whole foods, get a daily dose of beans. If you drink wine, drink it with family, drink mostly water, snack on nuts because it keeps us full and have other additional benefits. Go easy on fish. One of the problems we have with fish now is it's contaminated, right? Another problem that we're seeing across the world. Eliminate eggs or no more than 3 per week because the yolk is a source of cholesterol, a strong source of cholesterol. Slash sugar, reduce dairy, and then retreat from meat as you go up. And what we see is plant-based diets reduce your risk of coronary heart disease, but only if it's a healthy plant-based diet. So you can't eat junk food. And when we talk about plant-based nutrition and calorie density, this is one of the things that I like to show patients who are looking to lose weight. This is the same amount of calories from oil, cheese, meat, potatoes, rice, and beans, and fruits and vegetables. And what you can see is a tablespoon of oil and an entire belly full of fruits and vegetables have about the same number of calories and fat. And so that's why we're so much lower in calories and feel full and satiated when we eat fruits and vegetables. If we look at dietary components that increase LDL, that lower LDL, avocados lower LDL significantly, and really solid fats are what we should try to stay away from. If we look at ultra-processed food, right? So what does this food start the world as? We don't know, but it's increases our risk of mortality by 14% when we eat a highly processed diet. And so we shared the secrets of the blue zones. We'll say healthy eating patterns are key to healthy aging. A healthy eating pattern consists of reducing processed food, increasing vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and reducing saturated fat. And then a healthy eating pattern really is part of an overall healthful lifestyle. We should focus on all of these things together. Thank you.
We obviously have a lot of problems in this country with health, as everything was just highlighted. So I'm Matt Davis, and I'm about to give you the answer to best fix all of this, and that is more muscle mass. So I'm the muscle building guy, and I'm just going to spend my time probably not boring you with my boring slideshow. I think it'll be a little more productive to just give you some quick tip answers on how to do this. So after 30 years, especially now, we go to the gym, right? Most of us have been to the gym, or we do some sort of exercise at home. I think the missing link in all of this is how many of us are actually doing that exercise with the intent to build muscle. Or are we just going to pick this thing up over here and move it over here? And then we're going to walk around the room, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do, we're just moving. And I'm not to diminish that. Physical activity is good. But the reason the sarcopenia and the lack of function and the cardiovascular disease and the elevated blood sugar and all of the stuff that can be drastically reduced with more muscle mass, our industry as fitness professionals, we have done a very terrible job of informing the public of what proper muscle building exercise actually is. So let me present that to you today. We love to hear and you hear these terms such as functional fitness. That means we're doing tasks, more or less. We want to get better at doing tasks. Very similar to sports-specific training. You have a basketball player, they need to practice their basketball skills to be good at basketball. Being stronger and more muscular can enhance those tasks and also make them better. That's the missing piece that I would present. So what's the difference between a muscle building workout and a functional workout? You look at things like end ranges in the muscle. So what am I talking about like this? Let's take a squat, for example. You go to most gyms, you see a lot of people doing air squats, and it looks something like this. All right, why can't they go any lower? Some people say, well, I just can't go that low. I just can't do that. That's dysfunctional. That functional thing that they think they're doing is not really functional. They need to gain that function. And the reason that they're not functional right there is they're not strong enough to be functional. Maybe my body weight is too much to be that. So we have to scale that down. So when I'm talking about end range training, if my knee can bend this much, I should get stronger in that position. Maybe that squat's not the right answer, but there's plenty of exercises in a gym, from a front foot elevated squat. There's lots of good machines. I very much encourage everybody to go to the gym. A lot of this stuff you cannot do at home. But I just challenge people to think about how they're training their muscles while they're doing the exercise. Think about the lengthening and shortening process that's going on, like a bicep curl. You do a bicep curl, something as simple as not thinking, let me lift this object from here to here. Okay, I lifted it up to here 10 times, whoop-de-doo, check mark. Don't think about that. Challenge your patients to think about the muscle is lengthening and the muscle is shortening. The muscle is lengthening, the muscle is shortening. One of the gigantic things that absolutely applies to the constant theme that everybody's going to be talking about today is improved cardiovascular function, and a piece of that is nitric oxide production in the body. That's directly correlated with the intensity of a muscle contraction. That's one of the low-hanging fruits that we have to increase our body's own production of nitric oxide, is quality of muscle contraction. If I'm just going through this motion, just lift it up and put it down and lift it up and put it down, I can bypass a lot of that. Oh, I did 100 reps, great, awesome. No, I want to think about the quality. I want to contract that muscle. I want to know what it feels like. I want to allow it to open back up and lengthen, and apply that to every exercise that I do in the gym. That improves joint range. We get back to as we age. One of the things they wanted me to talk about is exercise as we age. Every single person that's been up here today has mentioned loss of muscle and sarcopenia. We can also talk about loss of stability, loss of balance. All of this is due to loss of strength and loss of muscle mass, barring some neurological condition. It's the lack of strength and the lack of muscle mass that enables these conditions. Mobility and flexibility. A lot of people confuse what's the difference between those two. Flexibility, let me stretch my leg and pull it back like that. That's as far as I can get it. The mobility is how much of that can I do under my own power without an external. You can't be mobile if you're not strong. It's not possible. So improving the strength, and this is, again, we want to be strategic and targeted on this. So that's my challenge to you guys, is to reevaluate how you think about exercise and strength training and incorporate that. I'm not saying that's the only way. The functional stuff is important. The cardiovascular stuff is important. We want to pull all of this stuff together, to create the perfect balance. And I bring all this, together to say all of that other stuff alone is not going to move the needle that much. At 30 years of watching people trying to gain muscle, just picking an object up and moving it over here and taking an object from point A to point B, there's not a lot of people gaining much muscle just doing that. You have to be targeted and you have to be specific. And when you go into the gym and when you do that set and when you do that rep, you want to think, why am I doing this? And you want to answer for that. And hopefully the answer in some of your workouts will be, I want to create a stimulus to build that muscle, not just to accomplish a task. Real quick, the nuts and bolts, how many times a week? You look at the statistics, somebody that goes from doing resistance training 1 time to 2 times, they have an increase of 50% in results. You go from 2 times to 3 times, another 50% in results. And here's the magic. You go from 3 times to 4 times, most of the population is going to get another 50% benefit of increased muscle mass. So 3 to 4 times looks to be the magic number for most people of specifically resistance training type of exercise. How many exercises, how many sets, how many reps, all of that's going to be highly individual based on the patient, mostly on their ability and how hard they can go. If it's all really, really easy, they're probably going to have to do more. If they can actually train hard and push themselves, you don't need near as much. That's an important factor when you get into this fatigue stimulus thing. You still want this to be something that you do and you generally feel better and stronger all the time. If you're tired and run down all the time, that's probably too much. So less fatigue. So there's an efficiency component when you go in the gym. But there again, that brings me back to my first point. I would say if you focus on the quality of muscle contractions and not just accomplishing tasks, you get much less of a fatigue to the stimulus ratio. So that works out good. The last component, and this is what everybody else touched on, so I'm just going to mention them. Obviously, sleep is key. You're not sleeping, you're not gaining muscle. Sorry. If the nutrition is not on point, same thing, too bad. That's a deal breaker. You have to have adequate protein. I agree with Ed 100% on the amount of protein required. I have never seen anybody gain any significant amount of protein or gaining any significant amount of muscle mass on a low protein diet. It is not going to happen. Let's also keep in mind, I know most of you guys patient base and the people that you're dealing with are a little bit older. They're a little bit metabolically damaged. Their starting point there is much lower than most of ours in this room. So it's going to be even harder on those people. So they need a lot of these things even more. Stress reduction. We live in a world where I'm a huge fan of all of these modalities, you know, to get a massage. There's a million of them. Cold plunge, that would be the one I would put a caveat in. There's plenty of data that indicates the wrong timing of cold plunge could actually impair the hypertrophy process. So if your goal is to pick that thing up over there and take it over there and go back and forth 100 times and you got to do it again tomorrow, cold plunge away, that's awesome. If you actually want to build muscle, I would probably steer away from things that are externally forcing kind of an unnatural reduction of that hypertrophy-induced inflammation. One easy one, chill out. Netflix is the undisputed muscle recovery modality. It really is. Or whatever helps you chill out. Meditation, we hear all of these things, but in a nutshell, trying to get your sympathetic nervous system dialed back down into a parasympathetic nervous system, that's the key. We can't be all gas pedal. We got to have some brake pedal in there too. One other thing is, as a generality, everything I'm talking about from an exercise standpoint is kind of gas pedal. So we don't want to just always add more exercise, more stress, more, you know, some people can get sore from massages. There's more things that cause you to be amped up. Chilling out, putting the gas pedal on, and identifying the things that may also be holding you back. So Ed mentioned the seed oils, we talked about the nutrition, we talked about the sleep. Sometimes the answer is if someone's already doing all those things, what is it that's restricting them? Take that foot off the brake pedal, alcohol consumption, But that's basically what I want to challenge you is focusing on muscle building in your exercise. I think we all know exercise is awesome. We all have to do it. We should do more of it. And but I would challenge people to think, build muscle specifically, and it's just not going to accidentally happen. You do want to think about it, and you want to challenge people to think about their muscles, not just their movements, is what I'll leave you with. Thank you.
This is one of my most favorite sessions, and part of what we're doing now is kind of trying to recreate a medical lounge. So as a young doctor, what we typically did was we met in the medical lounge, and I could talk to my colleagues and say, Alison, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I need your help with this. And we would have this, this rapport and this conversation and learn from each other. And so this is what this part of this is. This is for the audience to ask questions. But I have the pleasure of knowing the folks on this stage fairly intimately over the last decade. Jessica, we're new to each other, but I guess I want to first start off with asking everybody to kind of put their money where their mouth is. So, Dr. Bailey, you are a professed vegan. Is that true? Can you tell us why is that working for you? Because we have other people on this stage that would have maybe a different view of things.
No, I think that's great. I actually hate the word vegan because I think it brings things other than food into the connotation of the word. I think of crazy people when I think of vegans, and I'm definitely not crazy. Okay? I'm whole food plant-based, Chris, and you know this. We talk about it a lot. But, based on my research over the years, I believe that's the way that people live the longest free of disease. I think food is the biggest problem in our society. I think the government subsidizes cheap food that is processed and makes us all sick. Right? Nobody should be eating Captain Crunch. They just shouldn't. I mean, it's garbage, and that's what they've told us over the years, that this is healthy if we look at the food pyramid over the years. I really think if I look around and look at people who live a long, healthy life, they can eat lots of different ways. I think if you want to be a carnivore and run 25 miles a day, those people seem to live a long time if they live in the jungle. Right? There's lots of studies that look at that. I'm not going to do that. Right? I'm going to be walking around a hospital living in a high-stress environment, so I'm going to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and I try to get a lot. I do think we get too little protein in this country, but I focus on plant-based proteins. We eat lots of tofu and tempeh and all sorts of things. And as a girl who grew up in eastern Kentucky, anybody can change from that traditional southern diet to a plant-based diet.
Matt, just to kind of get your spin on things, is the goal actually important? Because Alison, you're trying to deal with this high stress, crazy life that you live, and Matt, if your focus is building muscle, then her diet won't work for you. Is that right?
No, I don't think it will. I think history shows that there's. I think it's important to not be dogmatic about anything. I think seeking the truth and seeking what works in, response to the goal that you mentioned. Everybody's goals are going to be a little bit different. I would also challenge everybody in this room to be the example for the people out there. I think that's one thing that's wrong in this world is when I go to the hospitals, even when I go to the gyms, nobody's living the example. And I think we have all chosen this as a path, and with that comes the burden of bearing the cross, so to speak. And that would be one thing, regardless of the track that you choose. But to do it to your best ability, and to me, that's the best way that we can inspire others to make those healthy choices.
I've known Ed for about almost a decade now, and nobody really knows your age, Ed. You can't ever figure it out, but you're a senior gentleman, and you look good, and you're doing something right. What's your secret to doing this right?
Thank you. Is there a secret? Not actually a secret. I think it's a wisdom. And that wisdom came to me through 45 years of being a personal guinea pig. My passion is learning, why do people become unhealthy? What can we do to turn the corner for so many people? Part of what I have learned is that we need to personalize the journey. As Dr. Bailey said, there's not one plan for everyone. And part of that is, again, getting a team approach of consultants who really know how to delve into your chemistry, give you the advice that you need, and help you to empower you on this not always easy journey. I will say that my health choices in my every decade kind of changed from my 20s. I really call myself a health nut from age 14. I'm 67. I did have double hip replacement last year, and I have reasons why I think that happened based on mistakes that I made with actually my choices of food, and that's a conversation for another time. But as far as if there is any key secrets, it is, Matt is exactly right. Weight training has been the one thing I have done consistently for all my life. And being fit is not the same as having muscle. Muscle is so correlated. Having muscle is correlated with living a longer, healthier life. There's just no doubt. And then secondly is sleep. I've been a chronic insomniac off and on, and I've managed to fix that. Number 3 is the amount of protein that I eat. I did not used to do that. Once I switched the protein, I never was below 10% body fat in my life, even though I work out crazy, until I hit 60. What changed? It was somewhat like Matt talked about. I became a little bit more devoted to a little heavier weights to build muscle, not be fit. And then secondly, the protein was 1 gram per pound of body weight. And again, we have coaches at Nutrition World that help you on this journey. So there's not one secret, but those are some of the bullet points.
Thank you, Ed. Jessica? I mean, someone's coming to you and they're having some hormone irregularities. What is your main focus on as far as their diet?
On their diet, so we highly recommend your store. I love your store. We send a lot of people your way. We also have in-house a nutritionist who, she is certified specifically for menopause women to explain like, hey, your body is changing, the testosterone's changing, the estrogen's changing. We need to focus on the protein to build that up, but also like going back to like the fiber plant diet, like we don't get enough of that. And so that goes back to inflammation, the joint pain, like all the things that go with it. So like I can do the hormone component, but there is so much more. It's just one part of your plate that I have to give you. We have to do everything. So it's very more like you said, multifactual, what we could do. So I could do my part, but I'm gonna give you resources to get the other parts too.
You know, Alison, I love the circle of 9 you put on the board, and the blue zones and how that kind of affects us. You know, just listening to what you guys are saying, it seems like different people are focusing on different aspects of that circle, and really, you know, maybe that's really where it's important, because I do think there are some healthy proteins out there, meats that are good. There's healthy fat that we should have. We should have, you know, as we get older, we should have a cholesterol level so we can actually make the hormones we actually need to continue being healthy. I'm 55, and work with one of my medical doctors, I started on some low-dose testosterone, and that really gave me some more muscle strength and more focus. And my body needed that. And so I think there's different times in your life where you're trying to engage that circle, and I think that's important. Is there any questions from the audience? We got a burning question over there in the corner, please. And we're going to give you a microphone.
Hey, I have a question specifically for Matt and Ed, and I understand all the nutrition, but he just brought up the testosterone. And so that is not, I mean, I guess it's natural, it's a medication, but I don't want these people to think that you can get the kind of muscle mass without taking something like that. It's not all nutrition and exercise, and I feel like that's a false thing that's said, you know. So do you take testosterone, Matt? Do you take testosterone, Ed?
About age 58, after blood testing, I realized that there was a need for a modest amount. The person who gives it to me, which is a physician, laughs at me for the small amount that I take. It is ridiculous. That was a game changer for me, though, in regard to my ability to build muscle and feel better in so many other ways. It didn't help my insomnia, it didn't help me grow hair, it didn't help, but it helped me in the areas that I needed to boost me at 60 plus to be able to perform, to get results again. So I'm a huge fan of testing like you do. It's not like the old school stuff and all the old myths about, oh, testosterone is going to cause half the men to have prostate cancer. Well, it's actually been all debunked now, mostly. The Women's Health Study, look how it frightened the whole country for years. We now know better, and luckily we have a group of people, thank to Dr. Lassar, being able to open this communication in the community of traditional medical people to let them understand that the old rules are not really the good rules anymore.
I would agree with that too. I would say look at all of these components as individual pieces of the same puzzle, and I would double down. This is something I talk about every day. More testosterone doesn't make up for a crappy diet and lack of working out. There's a right amount of everything, and I think that's the balance. I think the other thing to think about is when you really look at the population and the ranges and how those have changed over the last 15 years, it has been absolutely significant. I first had some blood work done in 2007, and the lab that I used, the upper end of the range was 1,500 for men. It's at 800 on some labs now, which is the average of people, like where these ranges come from. It's not somebody saying, hey, we think this is good. It's the average of the people that are getting tested is where they come up with the ranges. And we're seeing significant decline in that. Now, that's a whole nother probably weekend symposium to know why that's happening. But we do live in an environment where that consideration is huge.
And we do blood testing at Nutritional World on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I don't own it, it's downstairs. And I know you'll agree with this. The amount of 30 and 40-year-old men who have 200 levels, it's no wonder their libido is down. It's no wonder they're having relationship problems. It's no wonder they don't have stamina anymore in their life. And then on the other side, like Matt says, I've been in the gym 50 years. The amount of people, men I have seen who I'm on testosterone, who really don't get any gains. They don't look any different. They do not put together the plan of action like Matt talks about with working out, protein, diet, sleep. They just think it's a magic elixir, and it's not. It does not change you fully unless you embrace, as you're talking about, the whole picture of lifestyle changes, which takes discipline, and discipline's not easy.
Can I add one last thing to that?
Absolutely.
And in the medical world, I think the dogma really has gone away. I mean, there's only been one trial of testosterone replacement therapy in men with cardiovascular disease. And it showed it was safe as long as it was studied and, levels were checked and it was done within a reasonable level. I host a podcast called Excel Light, and we did an episode on that. So if you want to hear about that study, it's the only prospective study of testosterone replacement in men with coronary artery disease, cardiovascular disease. So it's safe as long as it's done correctly. And we used to say years ago, you can't take testosterone or you can't take estrogen therapy if you have heart disease, and those things just really aren't true anymore.
Yes, we have a question right here.
You were mentioning about how nutraceuticals is what you said weren't FDA approved, and how you guys are kind of debunking that, like they really are studied. And I'm not sure if this falls into that category, but when we're talking about testosterone, I have a lot of patients that come in that are getting compounded medication, so they're not like the testosterone cypionate, that's like pharmaceutical grade. And what I've noticed is that a lot of my patients that are either on semaglutide, so for weight loss, whose insurance won't cover Ozempic, or who are on compounded testosterone from a T clinic potentially, they're on higher doses because they're not getting the same effects. Like I see people on high doses of semaglutide who, as if they were on Wegovy or Ozempic on the low dose, they're actually seeing effects with that, but they're on the high dose of the compound medication and it's not as effective for them. And so I was just curious of your thoughts on that, because we do tell people that, well, we don't know what you're getting when you get a compounded medication, and so we recommend the pharmaceutical grade of that. But it sounds like maybe you have some experience in that.
Well, first off, I feel that we still, the public, and sometimes even I will do this, look for an aggressive quick fix on something, which really at my age, I quit doing that. And so when something's not working right, let's give more of a certain product like a hormone, and I think you would agree that that's in the end result can be disastrous because the whole picture's not being put together. I'm a big fan of enanthate and cypionate as the choices in the right doses when you test estrogens and you test all the other components and sex hormone binding globulin and all that. And a lot of clinics, or these T clinics, are not doing that. I really never refer, like I know your reputation and I know others, but as far as, trying to, so your question is the compounded ones. It's a little bit more of a Wild West, there's no doubt. Finding the compounded pharmacy that you trust with transparency and with confirmation that it's consistent, that you're getting what you're asking for every single time. There are those out there, and there's other ones that are not. So if you want to be totally 100%, stick with the pharmaceutical cypionate or enanthate, and then you don't have to worry.
I would also interject that dosing schedule has a lot. I think most people are on way too much of all of that in bolus doses when that's broken down into daily dose. Your body makes testosterone, for instance, every single day. Taking one bolus dose once a week you get this giant area over the curve. You have, hematocrit can go up, estrogen conversion increases, but having a very steady application, that comes probably back to a practitioner, maybe more than the compound, but that's what I see every day is with people's hormones going up and down, having the dosing schedule matters a lot.
Is there any other questions? We got one question over here.
Mike, how do you feel about the pellets versus the injections?
All I can tell you is I get
Dosing schedule.
tremendous feedback at Nutrition World. We have 400 people a day. Everybody likes to talk to me, like they would Dr. Lissar. There are some who, at first, the pellets were like, yay, that's great. But honestly, it's starting to fade out a little bit more with the fact that they just don't get the consistency sometimes, because as it starts waning, and then it goes down. And then when you get all the pellets, it kind of jumps up. It is more convenient, there's no doubt, 3 to 4 months, you don't have to do anything. But very rarely do I recommend the pellets any longer for men and women.
I've really enjoyed the lectures. I think they were great, but this was actually far better for me, just to have those questions and kind of get real with some of this. We're all trying to figure out how to navigate our life. We have one more question. Real quick question, that's it.
So
One question.
Do any of y'all have any apps like for nutrition or exercise that you would recommend? Just curious.
You add, Matt.
I can recommend several. Before I do that, I think the commonality that we are all preaching, and I talk about this every day, I do think as a society we're a little overconsumed about tracking macros and plugging everything into numbers. I say this 100 times a day. Just don't eat a bunch of crap, and you don't have to count it. If you're eating fruits and vegetables. So with that said,
I'm a vegetarian and I want to track my protein.
With that said, I would encourage, from a dietary, I don't really have any for counting. I just like looking at labels and kind of. The other caveat to just tracking, quality is everything. So you want to look for complete proteins. Sometimes, the numbers can be slightly deceiving. I see people that are getting their 200, 250, 300 grams of protein. 70% of that are incomplete proteins, so it's very misleading. So I would just challenge people to look at what is a complete protein, what are the best sources of that. Even within that, under the vegan umbrella, it can be done, but it will take some effort.
I like MyFitnessPal. It's free, and if you do a dietary log, it'll give you a summary at the end of the day. So I encourage patients, especially who are hypertensive, to look at it because sodium's hidden in food. Right, 90% of the sodium's in our food before we get it, but it'll break it down. And I agree, I don't think people should look so much at macronutrients, but think about a helpful pattern. But I think that is helpful when you're starting out. There's also a program called Levels, and you can get glucose monitors. I actually think glucose monitors are great from a learning standpoint. There's one called at Stello.com. You can buy it now without a prescription. Just because if your sugar goes straight up after you eat that food, it's probably not great for your body. It's telling you it's refined. And I just think it's good for people to see how different foods affect their body. And, I wear them sometimes and I'm always surprised at the things I cut out of my diet once I look at it. But Levels has some nutrition information in it as well, and you can buy that kind of stuff.
Another app that I recommend to a lot of patients is the Slay app. So basically, it does both dietary, mindfulness, and exercise. So it has tons and tons of different recipes, but specific for vegan, vegetarian, if you're okay with meat, whatever you want, but fantastic source. And then also the exercises, it does beginner, intermittent, master, and it shows videos for how to do them correctly for either at home strength training or at the gym. So it's a really good one. It is about $80 for a year subscription, but you get all of that in one, and it's personalized. It's really nice.
What was the name of that again?
Slay app.
S-L-A-Y? Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. All right, we're going to have to move on to the next session. Thank you, folks. You guys are some of my favorite people.